Thanks for joining this organized session on scaling carbon farming with stakeholders. We are going to talk about trust, certification schemes, and a lot of local initiatives. We have a lot of speakers here today and panelists also. We will start with a couple of sister Horizon projects. So Niklas, Vit, and I are going to talk about some of the activities we are doing within the Marvik project. Then there is Lisa for MRV for SOC project. She's going to answer the question, is there a demand for high integrity carbon farming credits? Then we have Katarina, which is going to introduce a holistic framework, certification framework for regenerative agriculture and carbon farming. And Daniele with his implementation of the CRCF at local scale in the Vicenza here nearby pilot case. And then we have Lorena, which is talking about driving scalable carbon farming globally with robust, credible certification. And finally, Anton with an interesting case study on the public-private collaboration for sustainable voluntary carbon markets in the Flanders. So a lot of speakers. We will have very short presentation. We'll ask you to keep the question for the Q&A session. We have an interesting panel session. It is slightly changed from the program that you have seen so far because Sam and Roman couldn't join because they also have a parallel session. You know, a lot of things going on these days. We thank them for helping us organizing this session. We welcome Anastasia Volkova, from, which is the CEO and co-founder of Regrow Ag. You have listened to her yesterday in the plenary panel session. Then we have Andrea Tosoroni from Arca Benefit and Alessandro Zatta from the Research Center for Animal Production, and also hopefully a Q&A session with you, of course. I would kindly ask the speakers also if you want to join me there and to introduce yourselves, because you know better than I what to stress about your experiences and what you want to share with the audience. I'm going to start myself. I am Silvia Coderoni. Happy to see you here. I am professor of agricultural economics and policy at the University of Teramo, and today I'm going to present you some of the activities we are doing within the Marvik project with colleagues from the Czech University of Life Sciences and the Catholic University here in Piacenza. We are basically analyzing the influence, the impact of perceived policy coherence and financial mechanisms on the carbon farming scheme participation and adoption. So we know very well that it's super important to involve stakeholders in this kind of analysis to understand synergies and trade-offs between the policies. So we have started with stakeholder surveys. The stakeholder surveys and the farmers surveys are still ongoing. So if you could please kindly scan this QR code. Here you can enter your name and email address, and we will send you this survey after the summit so you can compile it with all the time needed. Now we don't want you to be focused on that, but on the session. What are these surveys about? They are for both all the, let's say, stakeholders involved in the carbon farming scheme supply chain, from farmers to credit buyers, and there is one specific survey just for farmers. They are divided by land use type because we acknowledge that the replies can change deeply according to the land use type you are working on. So they are for arable land, grassland, agroforestry, and peatlands. I'm going to show you some of the first results, but just to stimulate discussion on the replies for the arable land type. We have 100 replies so far. 63 are for this cluster of land type, and as you can see, we have quite a differentiated representation of all the stakeholders involved. More than half of these people already participate in a carbon farming scheme. Well, when asking what financial tools already exist in your country to finance carbon farming scheme, the adoption of carbon farming practices, indeed, Not surprisingly, there is a lot of things going on in offsetting, insetting scheme, and common agricultural policy, both first and second pillar payments. So once again, to say what we already well known, the CRCF regulation didn't reach into a void, so we need to standardize approaches and we need mutual recognition if we want the CRCF to have an uptake, basically. What is interesting to me is when asked what kind of future mechanism do you foresee as useful to boost carbon farming practices and schemes, well, the first thing stakeholders point is specific publicly funded advisory services. We need a lot of this. We will talk a lot about advisory services in the panel session, so I don't want to go into that, but also, of course, offsetting and insetting mechanisms are seen as very relevant, also within the CRCF framework, and again, some more, let's say, innovative second pillar payments like result payment or hybrid schemes. And just a few words on the policy coherence analysis. Well, so far, we have seen that stakeholders perceive as quite coherent participating in a carbon farming scheme. It is considered to be quite in line with other policy objectives in their country or at regional level. But what we want to look into is at the coherence of each carbon farming practice with other environmental or economic policy objectives, because we know very well that the answer can change a lot. So when you will compile the survey, you will see a lot of questions like this. Do you think that in 5 years, which is the minimum commitment period, for example, use of cover crops will help reducing emission, increasing soil carbon, helping adapting to climate change, and so on and so forth. So what we have in the end is this kind of coherence matrix where you can see each kind of practice, how it is perceived as if in synergy, so the green box, or in trade-off with other policy objectives. So what we want to see, of course, we are still collecting data, but the final objective is to let emerge this trade-off in a transparent way to allow a more open and transparent decision-making process, and to see the impact of the perceived policy coherence on the likelihood of adoption of this kind of practices. Well, with that, I give the floor to Niklas, that is going to show you some other activities we are doing within Marvic with stakeholders. Thanks, Niklas.
Thank you.
Okay.
I need to sit down because I'm too tall for the mic. Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm Niklas. I'm a PhD student at Aarhus University in Denmark. I'm also part of the Marvic project at Work Package 5. And in our capacity, or rather with everyone at Marvic, we conducted stakeholder workshops over the last few months, and now in the past weeks the first results have flown in, which I would briefly like to present here. I'll keep it short because a lot of it has been mentioned over the last 2 days, so I'll just call into the echo chamber for a few minutes. Yeah, and the way we conducted these workshops was that we set out some general guidelines on how to do them, and then the different Marvic partners held the workshops in the 12 respective countries of the Marvic members. And in total, over 200 participants were part of these workshops. And these were policymakers, industry, finance, land users, etc. Pretty much the same kind of people you also see at the summit here. And these workshops, they first had a small survey and then had guided group discussions, and they took, it took them like several hours most of the time to conduct these workshops, so it's kind of a rather in-depth analysis and data set we have received. And they were about trust in carbon farming schemes and also general barriers and enablers in monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. Yeah, and I'll just present some very brief first insights of this qualitative data set. Yeah, and as I said, a lot of this has been mentioned before, but some of the main barriers that were mentioned were that payments are still too low, too late, and often being too uncertain for farmers. Still the high uncertainty in MRV systems. Regarding data collections, We often hear that it's burdensome for farmers, but also there is actually a kind of high level in distrust in how the data is collected and in data ownership, which can seriously affect the extent to which different stakeholders want to participate in carbon farming schemes. Then also the uneven risk distribution among participation in schemes, which has been mentioned several times the last few days. And yeah, incoherence has still been mentioned regarding policy and also regulatory uncertainty regarding the CRCF. And then some enablers that were mentioned, just very briefly, are hybrid payments and co-claims, which were also mentioned a lot the last 2 days. Then just more harmonized MRV systems in general, especially a stronger involvement of existing local advisory schemes. I mean, farmers often have their local advisors with whom they have been working for years, if not decades, and they tend to trust these advisors more than a new carbon farming startup trying to advise them. Then a better integration of existing public data and data infrastructure, and generally a more clear CRCF guidelines which are better aligned with the CAP. But those are just some very brief first insights, and we will publish a report and a full analysis later this year. Yeah, and that's it from my side already.
We have Lisa from MRV4SOC. Please, Lisa.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm PhD student with UCL Louvain, and we are happy with Godolphin and Brut to be part of the project MRV4SOC. And in this project,
But it's also the live streaming,
so we are. You here? Or hola. Hola. Oh. So we are part of the project MRV4SOC, and we are happy to work on the socio-economic implication of carbon farming and MRV system. And today I would like to take we would like to take you with us in our ongoing research journey and our ongoing reflection, because now our first results led to this question: is there a demand for high integrity carbon credit? So when we start a project, you might know that there is a global lack of trust, we all know, and this lack of trust is coming from the quality issue on the carbon credit, especially the overestimation of the credit. Since 2022, when the issue popped up, we see a decline of the volume of credit traded over time. And this question is important because the CRCF at the same time is promoting high integrity carbon credit. What are, in short, high integrity carbon credit? They are credit that would be based on tier 3 methodologies, model and measure, and measure and remeasure. But also they are linked to, they should include beyond carbon. We have been talking a lot about that, so include co-benefit, beyond the do not significant harm and damage, and also they should ensure to minimize the risk of removal with liability mechanism, such as collective buffer and insurance, upfront insurance. So here in MRV4SOC, we are studying the economic feasibility of those high integrity carbon credits. We first calculate the cost of MRV system, compare with decision support tools, hybrid models, and soil sampling. We compare different scenarios with innovations that could improve accuracy, but also reduce cost. And in short, we also compare the project specification, like monitoring period, monitoring frequency, baseline duration in the carbon farming schemes. And what we show related to those carbon credits, so I don't have time to go into much details, is that for the cost of the tier 3 method, so soil sampling and hybrid bone model, they are expensive at farm scales. And it might be that for small farm, we need a higher carbon price to be able that they are economically viable. But also for the permanence, that's kind of interesting, is that monitoring period does not increase the cost, especially with the fact that the value of money over time decrease, the cost could decrease in overall. But what matters is the monitoring frequency. That's what makes the cost increase. So going to the cost effectiveness, that's a super exciting topic. I'm just showing something very short. In our study, we compare the cost effectiveness of soil sampling and process-based model And here I'm just showing the soil sampling cost effectiveness, where we compare for different sample size the minimum detectable difference with the cost of sampling for a field. So 10 to 100 sample for a field in different region. And what you of course can see is the trade-off in cost and accuracy. That's not very surprising. But what we also show with the minimum detectable difference is that when the high variance of stock is high, it's not presented here, but we would be happy to send the link when the study is going to be publicly open, is that when the stock variance is high, it takes longer time to detect the stock change. And actually, across the demos, across the site, both for the process-based model and for soil sampling, it often takes more than 5 years to detect a significant stock change, which means that to be cost-effective, it would take time. We need longer monitoring period, probably, and it's also cheaper, but it's also something that we have to account for high-integrity carbon credit. Then we come to who is ready to bear the cost, because high-integrity carbon credit would mean higher cost for the farmer. It also means a higher price for the farmer, sorry. Co-benefit, including beyond carbon. Also, having better liability mechanism is also more expensive, and then longer monitoring period. But the thing is, and also higher accuracy. When we work on those questions, does it matter to have better MRV system? Who is paying that? Are companies really caring about what are those MRV beyond those credits? It's relevant to say, is there a demand for those credits? And what we want to be able to do is doing the link between those high integrity carbon credit and the demand of the company. So we are currently doing a survey with a master thesis, Manon Thirion, if she follows, but I don't think. We are currently, with Godole and Manon, implementing a survey to study the demand for companies. So if you're a company or if you know companies, please, could you share the survey to compare for different type of credit, which one you would choose. And for those, what are the criteria that matter? The price, the uncertainty, the co-benefit, or the permanence. For now, we only have 25 answers. And the problem is that for Manon's thesis, it's not sufficient to do statistics. For my PhD, I have much more time, so I might reach you out sometimes by the end of the year. But if you know people and you could share this survey very soon, we would be very happy. And we are looking forward, because this is the cherry on the top of my PhD, like to be able to share with you more insight. Thank you.
Hello, good morning also from my side. I'm Katharina. I'm a senior system manager at IECC, and there I'm responsible for the topics of regenerative agriculture and carbon farming. And before we go to the topic of regenerative agriculture, I would like to shortly introduce IECC to you. So IECC is a global certification system with currently more than 15,000 certificates, distributed in more than 130 countries globally. We are operating since 2010, and we work with independent third-party auditors and currently with 67 certification bodies globally. So, as mentioned, the IECC system can be globally applied, and we have more than 15 years of experience in sustainability certification. IECC is governed by a robust multi-stakeholder system, including industry, academia, and NGOs. And we cover a broad range of materials and products. This includes all agricultural main crops like corn, soy, wheat, but also perennial crops such as palm oil. The IECC certification is based on 6 sustainability principles that cover environmental requirements such as no deforestation, water management, and biodiversity conservation, but also social criteria such as human rights, no child labor, and economical requirements. For IECC, the full supply chain needs to be certified, also in order to ensure traceability along the whole supply chain. We offer a clear guidance towards credible and verified claims that are also in line with regulations, for example, the EMCO directive. So we developed a regenerative agriculture certification add-on. It's called add-on because it can be applied voluntarily in addition to IECC certification, and it builds on our sustainability principles. We designed it in a way that we don't only put the focus on the carbon, so the carbon sequestration and the carbon emission reduction on farm level, but also to put a focus on all the other benefits that regenerative agriculture has, which is soil health, water health, and biodiversity. We developed the regenerative agriculture certification in a multi-stakeholder approach, including also industry and academia, to develop a very robust and science-based certification. And in total, we did 3 pilot projects. 2 of them were together with Neste, one with Texas A&M University, where we analyzed the benefits of intermediate croppings on the soil carbon content, soil water content, and storage, and soil nutrients. The other pilot project was together with North Dakota State University, where we did field trials with intercropping and intermediate cropping of camelina, and also there we tested the benefits then for the carbon footprint, soil carbon content, soil water content, and soil nutrients. The third pilot project was together with Bunge, where we directly worked together with farmers from Poland and Hungary. And those farmers applied regenerative practices on farm level. So they applied minimal or no tillage and cover crops. And there we did, for several years, analyze the soil chemical and biological parameters. And also there in Hungary, we very recently did the first pilot audit with the regenerative agriculture certification for a farmer that's growing rapeseed in Hungary. So based on those pilot projects and in close exchange with different stakeholders, we defined a clear certification system for regenerative agriculture that has an impact on the 4 areas that I described, so on the soil health, on the water health, biodiversity, and the climate. And we defined 7 outcomes, which are improved soil health and conservation, increased crop diversity, optimized crop protection, increased nutrient use efficiency, increased protection of biodiversity, increased protection of water health and water use efficiency, and enhanced innovation, adoption, and resilience. And for each of those outcomes, we defined clear indicators and requirements that need to be implemented at farm level. These are, for example, minimal or no tillage or the application of cover crops. Towards the GHG emission verification on farm level, there are like 2 main routes you can go with IECC certification. So the first certification that we are currently developing with our sister company MEO is a product carbon footprint certification that can be combined with IECC certification and the regenerative agriculture certification add-on. The second pathway is via CRCF. So our sister company ClimatePal is developing a CRCF certification where we are developing a pathway to incorporate also the regenerative agriculture certification via IECC. Yeah, with that, I would like to summarize shortly. So with the regenerative agriculture add-on, we developed a holistic certification scheme that not only covers the carbon aspects, but actually all benefits that regenerative agriculture has. It's a science-based framework. We offer credible communication, guidance, and by that users can show that they are driving environmental impact, and we of course support the supply chain resilience. There's currently a public consultation going on where you can leave your comments and your feedback, and you can have a very detailed look at all the documents and the requirements of the regenerative agriculture certification, and you can find that on our website. It is planned to fully launch the add-on then in May this year. And as mentioned, the GHG emission verification is currently under development. If you're interested to have a pilot, for example, pilot certification, you can reach out to me directly, and we can arrange a meeting to discuss next steps. But thanks a lot.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Daniele Pernigotti. I'm the CEO of the consultant company is Equilibria that is working on carbon accounting and carbon transition. I'm also the chair at the European level of the CNTC-47 on climate change, the European standardization body, the technical committee responsible for climate change. I'm also the convener of the ISO working group responsible for the revision of the standard was mentioned by Caterina just a few seconds ago on carbon footprint of product ISO 40067. But I'm here today to tell you something about a new project, it's Cambiamenti. It was launched in 2024 by 6 big corp company in a very limited area. Vicenza area is a province very close to Padova, with the support of Accademia Olimpica, that is a very historic institution in Vicenza, was established several centuries ago, and with our support, with the purpose to put together the different stakeholders and to create a kind of a small ecosystem to implement the CRCF at very local scale, putting all the stakeholders together on the table. And the initial idea, the first part of the project, the phase 1, was focused only on forestry. And we complete the first phase 4 months ago. But the purpose of this project is to facilitate the match of supply and the demand of carbon credits, because we also heard from Lisa the importance to be in contact with the companies, because a lot of time the problem of carbon credit is to create the connection between supplier and the demand of carbon credits. But it's also interesting because the big corp want to see the result of their support, their financial support through the buy of carbon credits. And to put in connection together the supplier and the buyers is a very interesting opportunity in this direction. Then to simplify the access of carbon credits and to optimize the economic aspects, another very important concept or issue that was mentioned by Elisa before, because the idea to put around the same table supplier and buyers is also the way to avoid the transition or the transition cost, having some intermediate in the middle, so created a direct connection. And also important for the big corp is to see the direct result of their investment. So they buy carbon credits, but they want to see the result, and that to have the opportunity to see the forest growing in their area is another very important point to put in connection the different stakeholders. And the last but not the least, 6 years ago, we had the Baia storm in our mountains. It was 30 billion of trees, was completely destroyed. So we have a situation in our mountain now that requires to have a constructive, the redesign or replanting in our area. So the outcome of the phase 1 was to achieve the stakeholder engagement and to create the infrastructure of the local program. But now we are entering, it's a question of a few weeks, probably will be in April or in May. We will expand with the phase 2 the scope from forestry to agriculture. And we want to engage directly the stakeholder within the project. Before, the project was managed by the big corporate, by the company, by the buyers, involving some dialogue with the other subject. But now we want to create a very common table with all these other additional subjects. You can see here some owner of forestry territory. Confagricoltura Vicenza is the association of the farmers at the local level. And then we have also the association of the technicians, who is able to support the quantification for the removal, for example, and some other association that is able to support with funding the project. And the idea of this second phase of the project is to move from the design to the construction of the infrastructure of the system to the implementation phase. And yes, I'm just repeating what was in the previous slides. The purpose now is to move to the implementation phase, and we want to see if it's possible to really implement in the short time this kind of a connection between the different stakeholders, and to see if it's able to work, to identify the weak point and strength point at the local level in order to have some feedback even for the market, for the system. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much, Daniele. I am here today to present you basically looking from a local perspective now going into a global perspective, how carbon farming can be scaled globally and with a real-world impact for coffee. So 4C services, the 4C stand for Certification for Climate Conservation and Communities. It is basically an independent third-party driven certification system that offers practical solutions in the agricultural supply chain. To describe basically the holistic approach that this certification system offers and the vision that is behind it is to protect the environment, to secure human and labor rights, and to ensure sustainable livelihoods. Why this is relevant looking at carbon farming, this basically provides the trust, the farmer-level feasibility and integrity that is needed to scale carbon farming on a global level in the global coffee sector. To give an idea, and now looking at a map that is a bit bigger than what we saw the last days, not just on Europe, but on the global continent, we have certified coffee volumes available mostly in the regions that produce coffee, which is majorly Brazil and Latin America, Vietnam, in Asia and Oceania, and in Africa. I hope this is a bit better visible, but I hope you can read the numbers. I see the colors a bit mixed up. The biggest production takes place in Latin America, and the second biggest in Asia. So looking also at the numbers, this of course now is a different dimension. We have certified coffee in approximately 800,000 hectares, covering 300,000 farmers in 19 different origins, with 21 cooperating certification bodies, which amounts up to almost 2 million tons of green coffee certified. If you look at it in an international benchmarking level, this is the world's largest certification system in terms of volumes. And to understand, I'm very sorry about the colors. This was not supposed to be this color scheme. I hope you can still read it. If not, just try to listen. I'll go through the points. Basically, the system is based on a core certification that covers not just the environmental part, but also the social, the economic, and the compliance part. As we speak of carbon farming, I'll be looking specifically now a little bit more into the environmental part, where there is included no deforestation, complying with EU ODR regulations, CO2 reduction, water and soil protection, and also regenerative agriculture. Why this is important basically is because Europe drives global production, and CRCF and also climate policy that comes from Europe that sets expectation on the quality of carbon farming. And European buyers, they push these expectations into the global supply chains, and this is where a pre-MRV infrastructure helps to set credible carbon claims. If companies decide to push these expectations into the global supply chains, they can apply a carbon footprint scheme that was developed to help credible emission reductions within the origin countries. So this includes, I think we've heard a lot about it, but it includes reducing emissions from synthetic inputs. There's also the promotion of sustainable practices, agroforestry and coffee farms, the adaptation that are country-specific, and a dedicated improvement plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and plans towards net zero journey. And again, I just wanted to emphasize this. Basically, this is a prerequisite on scaling carbon farming globally, because carbon accounting, which is not the only perspective we should take, that we also have regenerative agriculture, and biodiversity perspectives, but these are focusing on, these are measured by carbon footprinting, which then combined can create a closed loop. And I brought an example. Unfortunately, the title is not readable, but it covers basically the real-world impact illustrated by a project we finished together with the project that's called Increasing Climate-Friendly Robusta Coffee Production in Tanzania. So this this project shows on the right side, hopefully readable. We have a lot of different project partners involved from the coffee sector, but it shows how big the impact can be if such carbon farming schemes can be implemented on the global scale. There were around 8,000 farmers involved and engaged in trainings using a structured field verified curriculum. There was capacity building with field officers and lead farmers trained, so following the trainer approach. There were 44 demo plots established as learning hubs, and finally almost 330,000 shade tree seedlings distributed. And the effect was a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of 22% compared to a baseline that was set 3 years ago. That was achieved by improving agricultural practices, scaling them across all farmers, and also more efficient transportation and reduction of packaging. With that, I thank you very much, and for any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, good morning, and congratulations to everyone who made it to the last kilometers of this marathon. I will try to surprise you and not to repeat too much, but I'd like to present a way of working in Flanders as we do it now. I am the policy and financial coordinator of the Flemish Action Platform for Carbon Removal and Carbon Farming. It's actually a unique collaboration between different government entities like the Agency for Nature and Forestry, the Agency for Agriculture, a kind of land bank, and the Institute for Nature and Forest Research. And why do all these entities collaborate? Because they see that the synergies of carbon removal and carbon farming are much bigger if you work together than if you all do it separately. And of course, from a policy point of view, we all know that CRCF is quite complex and that it's better to collect the efforts and to have a coherent policy framework than everybody's doing something in their own corner. I'm also here with my colleague, Stin. This is a bit the way that we work right now. We work through 3 networks, expert networks. I myself am responsible for the navigation network, in which we are starting a translation towards multiple stakeholders like farmers, foresters, to explain what the EU CRCF regulation is like, how it can work for them. Also thinking of implementing it toward the Flanders situation, which is very different than a lot of other European situations, as a very dense, small region that is very mineralized also, not that much open space, and so that we have to see how we can work with that. And also the financial network, you also heard it over the last days, the Buyers Club, how to get a good balance between the right price for the right kind of certificate. And as I mentioned, my colleague is working on the MRV network. This is a graphic from the ILVO project, Carbon Counts. It is a challenging mountain to climb to start a project in a CRCF. You can see the enormous amount of steps that you have to take, but I think I have a bit of background in a startup, and we were always looking for shortcuts, how to find the shortcut, how to cut the corners, and I think there are ways of cutting corners also from a policy point of view. This is the gap a bit that we have to cross. I think one of the most important words in this session is trust. There was a crash in 2022 of the certificate market because of this kind of greenwashing that happened. We have to admit it, that there was stuff that was not happening on the field that was promised. And this is the gap that we have to cross again. And here in this graphic that I made last week, I tried to show a bit what the concerns are when you speak to shareholders. We often focus on the costs for the farmers, for foresters, and it's true that they have a lot of costs in the beginning when they want to start a project, but we also sometimes neglect the costs for those who want to buy CO2 certificates. They have the due diligence costs, and they have to see every year which kind of certificates that they want to buy. And it's like, putting your hand a bit in the fire, like, how risky is this what I want to do? And so they fear sometimes, what if I do this? And they still get criticized for doing greenwashing. On the other side, the fear is, what if I do this and nobody is willing to buy the certificates and I will miss on this income? And so the gap that we have to cross, I think, is part of the policy approach, and maybe intermediaries also, is taking steps for MRV, making it more simpler for other players to use MRV, to do a kind of matchmaking between both the farmers and the future buyers. And for them, of course, the concern, but it's a concern for us as a whole society, is what if we miss the climate and nature targets? The wins are very big, and this is really why I believe in carbon removal and carbon farming, is that if we can find this kind of coupling between the two groups, then the first group can have the funding and they can do what they can do best. And this is not admin and TVA and Sunday work with paperwork. It's really farmers being able to do farming. The government that is doing part of the compliance and accompaniment of farmers. And in this sense, de-risking and reducing the friction between the transaction costs between the first group and the second group. And of course, the certificate buyers, usually large companies, but in some cases also small SMEs, they can fulfill their ESG obligation, but they also know that there's no business on a dead planet. We really have to punch that line from time to time, because it's really important to mention that a lot of businesses are taking big risks if they do not have a climate policy or a climate approach. And this is something that, especially at the banks, financial institutions and insurances, is very real. They realize this, and in that sense, if we can convince them to pre-invest, for example, in certificates, that they are willing to go. What are some of the shortcuts that we could see and that I will put into my proposition for a policy framework? There is already a lot of existing data that the public authorities have and that they can use, and they can find more additional data. Yesterday we saw a session on the soil monitoring law. I think increasingly we will have more data, and it should be possible to automatize and have more easy or less complex, I should say, for MRV. There's also the part where the public authorities already have compliance tools in place, and so that they can already follow up and do actually a part of the MRV or the M and R without having to add extra costs to the transaction. And then the land plans, they are also very clear, LULUCF, nature restoration. This will also add to the possibilities. In a sense, the architecture of what we need for CRCF is already in the making through these other regulations. And then the last point, this is a bit apart. I think that's both dependent on CAP, but also on other elements, is where the government really tries to push for incentivize the right products that can be made by carbon farmers. For example, bio-based materials, biochar, local products. This can, I mean, the public tenders are 10 to 15% of the market. Ideally, the farmer wants to sell what he is sowing, not necessarily the certificates, but in that sense, public players can also push for these kind of products, and in that sense create a virtuous circle instead of a vicious circle that we sometimes have now. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to everyone. Okay, we were scared that many things would have already been said, but I think that many new things have been explored. Thanks, everybody, for your presentation. Now we move to the panel session. As I told you, we have some slight changes in the panel composition. I would like to warmly thank Anastasia Volkova for accepting our invitation to join the panel. I would invite all the panelists to join me here, please. Thank you. Anastasia, she's the CEO and co-founder of Regrow Ag. Then we have Andrea Tosoroni, which is from Arca Benefit. Sit wherever you want, even here, perfect. And Alessandro Zatta from the Research Center for Animal Production. Maybe this works, so you have your own. So we can start a bit of discussion with you and then involve also the audience here. I would kindly ask you to introduce briefly yourself. And I would also ask if you could please launch the VooClub that we have to involve a bit the audience here. We have a QR code to scan. Possiamo condividere il VooClub, per favore? Grazie. And yes, I didn't, have a signal for that. So while we share this on the screen, I would like to start with you, Anastasia, if you would like to tell us. Okay, so now we have also the VooClub, so sorry. If you could, meanwhile, join, you will see a question we want to know. Actually, I think it's something we have already been asked yesterday during the panel you were attending, but we will have some more, let's say, insights. So here, we want to know basically what are for you the main barriers for the scaling of trustworthy carbon farming schemes in Europe. And I would like to ask you, Anastasia, in particular, for you, what are these barriers, but also what are the solution around MRV systems and what opportunity exists to scale soil organic carbon monitoring and also make soil carbon outcomes operational for the supply chain, sustainability, and procurement professionals, so basically almost everything.
How to fix everything. Okay, great. Thanks. And I get this question first thing in the morning. This is fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia, and I'm Ukrainian born, but I have this accent now because I live in the US, and this is where we left to with the Ukrainian situation. The previous speaker did an incredible job of already explaining what are some of the barriers and the solutions. So it's almost like a presentation I could have given myself without changing much. One of the slides, though, the one that had a lot of boxes, we also have arrows following. We have an internal slide at Regrow that's like that, and we show the flow of information. So when you layer the arrows on top of the boxes, it's complete madness. So what are the challenges and the solutions? The challenges, realistically, is that our desire for accounting and different solutions changes every year. Regrow is 10 years old. Every year we had to build technology and science for the new methodology, every single year. We first thought, okay, well, how do we fix this? Let's do nitrogen agronomic management. Then what do companies want when we work with CPGs? Well, they want something high rigor. What's the highest rigor? Let's do offsets. Let's build an offset methodology. Let's build it for Vera. Then let's scale it for car. Let's get car approval. Let's get a generalized car approval. Then, wait a second, what is happening? Oh, we're moving towards insets. Let's educate everyone on insets. Now what's happening? It's inventory. Aren't you tired from me just saying that? It's exhausting. And what it means is that for a company like us that has millions of hectares and acres and MRV programs, and it needs to scale and it needs to pass audits, we have passed every single audit we've ever gone through. We're delivering this quarter on 38 programs. Can you imagine the amount of complexity when we work in 22 countries, all continents, very large-scale programs that each have outliers, farmers that dropped out, permanence monitoring requirements. I'm not complaining about the fact that the space is complex. I think climate is nuanced and it needs to have complex solutions, but I think we just need to get on with something and stick with it for a while so we can scale it and it's going to be cheaper. So from my perspective, one of the biggest unlocks would be making sure that CRCF is aligned with this SBTI methodology and that the corporates that currently the companies that we work with 40% of the top agri-food and beverage companies, they drive most of the, what we call carbon farming, and we call it like this here, but really it's regenerative agriculture for their supply chains because it's risk management. So for them to participate together with the public funding, they need to have alignment so they can claim it. How does MRV get involved? Well, hopefully we cannot just drive the costs down by scale, but drive the cost down by not having to reinvent an entire R&D package every year because it's just expensive. So I will stick to just that point because we can solve for a lot of problems, but I think it was presented by Lisa on credibility and by previous speakers that I think all the pieces are at the table. We do have to affix it, and I think Europe is great at releasing the regulation that maybe Sustain Cert can monitor. It's going to be Scope 3 insets aligned, and then we will have a market where insets and offsets can live on the same CRCF registry that would make it competitive for farmers price-wise, because a lot of the programs we operate in are private right now. And it's hard to assure that there's no double counting, despite what we are able to do internally. It's a cross-industry collaboration that needs to happen. So I'm very hopeful about these solutions and very hopeful that we heard it from Valeria from stage and from Panos. So yeah, I think we'll fix it, but we just need to stop changing everything. It's expensive.
Very, very good point. I think something is already emerging from the pool we are having here, complexity, the EU recognized schemes. There is a lot of things, legal understanding. Yes, we need stability in the legislative framework or regulatory framework, and yes, also credibility, of course. But also we need a lot of information. There is this understanding here which is quite relevant. So Alessandro, I want to ask you, I know you are the coordinator of the Italy for the EU Climate Smart Advisor project. So how are you addressing this issue within this project of the need of advisory services? What are the main findings so far? Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia, for the question. Thank you to ask me to participate to this interesting parallel session. Yes, just a short introduction about the Climate Smart Advisor is an European project that the aim is to create a network between advisors in Europe through the creation of community of practice, where there is a coach and then there is 5, 6, 7 advisors that the objective is to create a knowledge exchange in peer-to-peer and also to organize a training session, workshop, and so on. And the credit carbon is one of the main topics that are in on the COPs and the network. And last month, we organized a workshop where we tried to collect different stakeholders and also advisor, and how to understand which is the role of the advisor in the CSCF regulation. And was interesting because there was many kinds of stakeholders, so from cooperative to farmer association, advisor, and so on. The main result was that the role of advisor is more or less all. That means, so the advisor, the agronomist, or the technicians is to help, for example, the farmer to adopt the best agronomical practice, so directly in the field. But not only this. For example, another role that could be the advisor is to link the farmer to the agri-food supply chain in the incentive project, for example. Another role could be to help the farmer on the certification process. So help them to apply the certification, help them to do the monitoring. That is another big, big question in the MRV. And also find the buyer of their credit, their credit carbon. That was the main result that we saw in this workshop. But another interesting point was another question was which is for you the more penalized sector, agricultural sector, for the CSCF regulation, and is the livestock sector, because we are a research center on animal production. So we have a strong link with the dairy farm, cow farm, sheep farm. And when I started to speak about the CSCF regulation, carbon credit, and so on, they said, okay, but which could be our role? Because in fact, we have manure, we have and the organic carbon in their soil is high, so they don't have too much buffer to increase more. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alessandro, also for this perspective on livestock, that we know we are going to have some new, maybe, CRCF certification framework in this year. We are waiting for understanding whether livestock will be included, and we have heard that they are already working on a certification scheme to understand whether and how to include maybe, no, mostly methane and nitrous oxide emissions, because for soils, of course, they are already included, but it's a big issue because it's also the bulk of the emission of the agricultural sector, we can say that. Yes, I see here that a lot of people also mention issues related to the demand. We know very well, I see that, so far the discussion has been focused mainly on technical aspects, MRV aspects, which are of course relevant, equality criteria and so on. But now we have understood that maybe we missed the demand, maybe keywords, the takeaway keyword of this summit will be the buyers club, maybe. Nobody exactly knows how it's going to work, but yes, it's the implementation, the starting phase is just now, so we will see. So I would like to ask you what could help to boost the demand for carbon farming credits. And also I would like to ask, meanwhile, Andrea, in your experience, in your organization, how important are these supply chain approaches to promote sustainable farming practices?
Okay. First of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. So, concerning our company, we are a small SME company on we are, sorry for the English, we are a small, medium enterprise working on research and development of agroecological regenerative organic agriculture with the aim to develop a food value chain of products deriving from this agriculture. So our activities include consultant, technical assistance, and experimentation with the farmer, first of all. And concerning the question, in our experience, we think that mechanisms such as long-term contracts and risk-sharing agreements are one of the key points of this work, because we know that every day with the farmer, okay, it's easy to explain them. They know very well the benefit that they get from these practices, but the point is, okay, but how can I valorize my products? So one of the aim of our company is we are building also a food value chain with the aim to go to the market with the products deriving from this organic regenerative agriculture, and so to give a kind of a closing cycle of the entire system, because, okay, the carbon market credits and so on, but we are more focused on the food value.
Yes, yes. We don't forget that farmers produce food. Sometimes it seems that we do. And also I see here a lot of replies pointing to the fact that maybe, as someone also was saying, we need to move from voluntary to regulatory approaches if you want to push further the CRCF regulation and basically GHG reduction. I think that, is in the air. We know also about the results of this report on the EU Climate Change Advisory Board. Maybe something is coming in the agricultural sector. Maybe the people in this room are more ready than others to face this. But anyway, also a lot of issues regarding risk and risk reduction, of course, that you also mentioned. Maybe working with the supply chain is again the answer. But now I would like, as we have some times, which I didn't expect at all, and we didn't have any question for the speakers, is now the moment. If you want, I would like to open the floor for discussion and to have question for speakers, panelists, or whatever. Thank you. I have the mic here. If you can also briefly introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those really interesting comments from all the speakers so far. So my name is Liz Bowles. I'm the Chief Exec of the Farm Carbon Toolkit in the UK. We're an organisation that supports farmers to understand their greenhouse gas emissions and ability to remove carbon, and we work with them where they are to make those changes. But we've also developed one of the most commonly used farm carbon assessment tools that measures whole farm carbon footprints within the UK. My question is probably mainly for Alessandro, but also I think to really highlight the importance of actually properly addressing ruminant livestock in this space, because it has felt a little bit as if we're just not talking about them, and they have the ability through how they graze to actually remove carbon as well as produce it. And I wonder, Alessandro, whether you could sort of talk about that and actually perhaps what we should be doing rather than what isn't happening. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I think the livestock sector is play a key role in the reduction, also because it's one of the main organic organic matter that we can put in the soil, so the manure and so on. So, and then we can work on optimizing the manure spreading, because, okay, we are speaking about the CO2, but also we have nitrogen dioxide, we have methane emission, so that is two GHG gas emission that where the livestock sector can play a key role. And I hope, I listened in yesterday that the next step will be to insert also this sector in the CRCF. And yes, that's, I think this is really important. Maybe the question is how we can measure also this greenhouse gas emission, because it's not too easy. It's not easy like CO2. And also which kind of instrument, so is I think a big question. But I think I agree with him that the main role of the farmer is produce food, healthy food in a healthy soil. So the best practice, the carbon farming, we are working on carbon farming is more than 10 years in our research center, and before to credit carbon. So because the more important things is to help the farmer to be more resilient and to adapt their techniques to the climate change. Open question. Thank you.
I just want to pause at something. You hear food companies say a lot of our supply is already aligned with regeneration. And then on the other hand, you hear people like me and Panos show you maps of millions of acres around the world where everything is red. And you're wondering, well, I am definitely wondering, because I'm dedicating my life to fixing this problem, where is the gap? What happened in the middle? And what happened in the middle is that we feed a lot of crops to our livestock. And that supply chain is a lot more complex than supply chain of food ingredient. Making pasta in Italy from Italian durum wheat or even beer locally is a 5 people supply chain. Livestock can change hands more than 10 times in some countries, or even come from overseas. And feed is a huge opportunity for decarbonizing livestock. Manure management is already something that's known biogeochemically. Enteric has its standard equations, but CRCF right now, which is a bit concerning, is only looking at the soil and extensive livestock management, which is the least known component scientifically from the soil perspective. We have a model for everything else but that piece. And if we are saying CRCF should start with that piece, we will also just have to sample it, and that will be high cost. And like Alessandro said, if they're already doing the right thing and we're sampling it and we're seeing that it's high carbon, how can we motivate them? Will it be a regenerative label on the packet that will say this is regeneratively grazed product, and the consumer and I've seen that maybe some of the participants have also talked about a grocery store, and the grocery store will actually push for that product because it's lower carbon and they want to decarbonize themselves as well. So it's not insignificant. I just talked with you through the entire chain of how we go from science to where the farmers are at to needing it on the shelf. So we will have to fix the livestock problem. We're running out of time. It's 2026. We promised a lot of things by 2030. We have nothing for livestock. So that is probably the biggest point of attention, because crops are done. They're fixed. Like we know what to do. We know what to pay. We know who to ask. We just need to create certificates they trust. Not very complicated. Livestock, life-changing for the planet.
Also, a short comment also on livestock, because we were talking about this with Alessandro just yesterday. In Italy, a lot of livestock specialists, big farms, intensive farms, but they are quite a pioneer in GHG reduction, so they tell you they are scared about the CRCF because they say, I already have topsoil organic carbon in soils, I have a biogas plant and whatsoever, what can I do more to reduce my emission? So it's the same issue of the pioneers in carbon farming practices, so it depends on the baseline and so on, but I feel also this kind of obstacle or this, let's say, fear in Italy. But Anton has a comment also?
Yeah, a small question on the what was mentioned here in the WOOC lab, accessible price. For me, I sometimes think that people really underestimate how difficult it is to store carbon in soil, in plants, in whatever is mentioned in the CRCF regulation. And for that reason, that we sometimes underprice the ton of carbon. I mean, the industry of steel and concrete has tried it for 20 years, and they are at a price of 200 to 250 euros for CCS. And they say to the Commission, sorry, the business case is not there yet. And then I see carbon credits being sold internationally for 10, 20 euros as if it's, as if it's nothing. And I wanted to ask you about that. What do you think is a decent level of price in Europe? It can be a fork between a certain level, because I sometimes feel that we underprice, because we know that carbon is very expensive in the societal costs, and by trying to kind of lower the price to make it easier to buy, that we actually are not valorizing at the full level.
Thank you. A question for economists. Do you want to?
I love the money questions. That's what makes the world go around. So Anna yesterday on the panel said that we have a 28 billion average annual loss because of the conventional farming versus regenerative farming, and I trust her on it. She's one of a very competent few people in the world that have done the work. And in the 1 in a 50-year catastrophic year, it's the 60 billion euro loss. So the reason I'm talking about that is because this is the money we are paying in insurance, in arrears. We could move this money and pay them up front. And a lot of it is paid in government insurance and government subsidies, or by companies in procuring from other regions because the supply chains fail. So I think we will need to do the math. But if this is the true societal cost math logic, and I will explain 2 other versions that we can get into this number. The other version is what will make sense for the farmer to adopt? How do we get large-scale adoption? Maybe for the livestock farmers in Italy, it's not carbon farming. I want everyone to take away from this summit that what we're talking about is regenerative agriculture and resilience. They called it carbon farming, and it's great. That's why we all showed up here, because we know the keyword. But what we're really talking about is how to decarbonize the supply chain and make it more resilient. Livestock farmers would be compared in Italy to their Argentinian and Brazilian colleagues, right? Like, I'm not saying anything that hopefully is a taboo in this room and I will not be expelled. So if that is the case, an Italian farmer is better, they should be able to be paid for that lower emission factor, for a higher sequestration, if there is the border adjustment, because you can't penalize European producers and then just accept everything that's coming from other markets. So that creates value in the value chain where you start pricing this against other countries. Last is probably the easiest method to figure out what we need to pay farmers is what does it cost right now? And I wouldn't say we need to look at urea prices because of the Iran conflict. I think we should look at that and say, well, that is more the reason that we should transition to regenerative and sequester our own nitrogen with crops and rotation and be more resilient. What I understand is it can cost from 30 to 60 euros to implement cover crop, to 100, 150 euros to implement manure management, organic amendment on a cropping farm, collaborating with livestock, let alone fully integrate the operation. So it's clear that we need higher than 60 euros per ton, which is some of the best food companies have that as a number right now. I think it's a good number. It's a value chain number. It really costs them a lot to implement those projects right now. I'm not talking about registries selling agroforestry credits for 5 to 10 euros. That's not what I'm talking about. True regenerative agriculture in supply chains. But I think the farmers will really start adopting when it's beyond 100 euros. 100, 200. 200 is a really good price. It's shared a lot of the time. We're part of CAA Alliance and Ischia. And we've shared our position papers of what we think the price will need to be, but those are the numbers and the ranges. You can get into them either from what it costs to the farmer or what it costs to society.
Okay, thanks a lot. Just a comment on the issue of the prices and on demand and supply, because, you know, as economists, you always wake up with these keywords. The issue, I think it comes back to something that emerged also from the book club. Indeed, you have a demand for a good if it is useful, and it depends on the quality. So CRCF regulation work on the quality criteria and credibility and so on, but the demand must find this good useful, and it won't be useful until maybe we don't have some kind of obligation. But
thank you, Silvia. Based on the demand and the policy and the fact that we should make it mandatory, I've been talking to a few companies in the context of our study, and one other important thing for the demand is the policy coherence, because we have, like, I think we could say that we have a backsliding in environmental politics. The ambition of the CSDR has been reduced, so it's less mandatory for most of the companies. Like, yeah, the CAP environmental agro measure are also have, they are planned to also reduce the ambition. And so in the end, companies, they were said in 2020 with the Green Deal, let's invest in green claim and sustainability reporting and everything. And when I was working at First Action, I remember company getting ahead in 21 yet with how to implement those policy. And now they're just being said, oh, drop off. But then why do we need to buy credit? Doesn't matter. Why not to just buy cheap things? And there is a paper that I didn't show, but there is companies and big companies buying just cheap credits because, and there is a demand for cheap credits. So it's a bit yeah.
For sure, the political environment and the world situation we know very well doesn't help. We did have quite a stop with the Green Deal ambitions, or we slightly changed these ambitions, and this didn't help. But also from the survey we are doing, it emerged that if you ask to credit buyers, they tell you that the policy framework is not coherent, while farmers perceive it is more coherent because, again, it's something they are already doing, those that do regenerative agriculture or organic farming and so on. So any other questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting comments. And I'm thinking about going back to the side that obviously agriculture needs to produce food. And from also like from the body of these practices, I've been working on the side of the farmers and so on, but in the side of the consumers, do you think there is knowledge about the value added of these type of practices, or is it just that consumers know, like biological, the labels that we already have?
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, as I tried to explain before, our aim to create a food value chain, one of the key points for us is to share with the customers all the steps the production chain is doing to create this food. I mean, so for sure we need a very strong part of communication, because we think that one of the key points for all the change is that the customer became the main actor to change the system. I know it's very ambitious, but if you just choose food just from the label, the color, that can change nothing. But one of the key points of all the food value chain creation is the communication, because beyond the food, and the single customer has to know. So has to become more cautious. Yeah. So for us, is one of the key.
There are studies that demonstrate that sustainably marketed brands have grown, especially with the Gen Z, double digit as opposed to single digit, because food market is so big, your brand usually doesn't grow more than 10%. And 10% is a high number. Usually it's much fewer because there are such large companies. So if you're sustainably marketing it, it grows a lot more. And so that's why there's an emergence of small companies that do these high growth, very good brands. And then they could even be purchased by larger companies, and we can kind of out-innovate ourselves out of this problem this way. But I think you all know probably how the burden of the climate change was put on the consumer. So I don't need to educate you on that and the fossil fuel PR play behind that. But I think what I do need to say to also counteract that and make it a balanced argument is food companies legitimately look at what moves on the shelf. They really respond to big consumer alignment. And so if something is smaller, packaging, smaller footprint, and it gets purchased by the consumers, the company will continue to invest in that. And if they launch something and they don't see the demand, it's very difficult for them. They divest, they get discouraged internally. So anything that can be done to build on fantastic Italian legacy where you see the qualità label, you know you can buy it, it's amazing. I don't think we will label everything with regenerative agriculture, maybe a certification label of a kind for product carbon footprint perspective, maybe, but we will have transitional labeling on the product that helps instruct the consumer. Maybe we just talk to them about what companies do. They talk about farm work, incentives to the farmer, work with the farmer to try to educate the consumer that the on-farm piece is important, even if they're not paying for it to be labeled as regenerative, because the consumer doesn't recognize anything around it yet. You know, there's ROC label, regenerative organic certified, that Patagonia is behind, or Region Agri or other ones. How few products have that? Consumer don't fully understand. Like you said, organic is a lot more developed, but we don't want regenerative to be the next organic and only take 10% of the market, because regenerative needs to be the new norm, otherwise we don't have a planet to live on. So I think there's going to be a transitional motivation and incentive. The consumer is very much involved because for the food companies, they respond to it. But personally, I don't think as a consumer, you can also say, I will fix the world by buying everything regenerative. I think you should try, and all of your euros should go towards it. But ultimately, we talked, if we can get all of the meat into the supermarket or into bodega to be regenerative from everywhere in the world, that will really help, and it's a more complicated system. But if consumer demands it, they'll do it. If we ask in a restaurant where it comes from and if it's regenerative, they will do it.
Thanks a lot. Okay, if there are final questions, I think we can close the session. I would like to thank you again, all the speakers, the panelists, and of course you for being here till the end, and let's enjoy the coffee. Hopefully it's sustainable. Thank you. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation.